Hey, welcome to the former Red Glare podcast. I don't make that podcast anymore, but if I did, I would have some thoughts on the Texans, and I'd like to share them with you now. Now, we roll into week 3 as a 2-0 team, which is exciting, which is awesome. So the critiques that come in the next few moments, I don't want them to overshadow the fact that it's awesome to be 2-0 and to be a fan of this team when they're relevant, when they're playing well, when they're exciting. And so don't I know what it was like to follow the Davis Mills Texans, so don't get me wrong. I'm not being a spoiled kid here, but I have expectations for this team. And I watched the Jets last night demolish the New England Patriots because the Jets are a pretty good team and the Patriots are a pretty bad team. And I kind of think of the Jets and the Texans in a similar light. The Texans have a bald, defensive-minded head coach. So do the Jets. We both have superstar celebrity quarterbacks. We both have a defense that would like to pressure the quarterback as our identity on defense. We both have superstar corners from the same draft. We both have star wide receivers. We're very similar. And if I was a Jets fan going into last night's game, I would say if you're the Jets, if you're good, if you're a real contender this year, you should push around the New England Patriots. And that's exactly what the Jets did. If I was a Jets fan, which thank God I'm not, because I don't want to have to root for Aaron Rodgers, but if I was, I would be very happy with the results of last night's game. Now, my thought was, as a Texans fan heading into the Bears game, the Bears are not good. Texans, you're supposed to be good. Push them around. And we did. And we did push them around. But you exist, as we know,
in the context of all in which you live and what came before you.
This team didn't just show up today, falling out of a coconut tree. It existed last year. And I'm concerned through 2 games and through the 17 games we watched last year that we have adopted a sort of conservative, defensive-minded approach to our game plan, to our approach on game day. And I want to give you an example. Bryce Young was benched this week because he's an abominable quarterback. He's horrible. We owe Lovie Smith a debt of gratitude for helping us avoid having to root for Bryce Young. And one of the stats that flashed across the screen when I was watching a story about his benching was that he was 2-15, I believe, as a starter. But one of those wins, if you recall, was against the Houston Texans. An 0-6 Panthers team beat the Houston Texans last year with C.J. Stroud healthy. We ran the ball 30 times in that game. C.J. Stroud had 24 pass attempts. We had 119 passing yards as a team in that game. And we played that game, DeMeco Ryans managed that game, as though we were Mike Tomlin's Steelers, as though we could win the game by simply scoring 13 points. If we could get to 13, the Panthers have no chance of beating us. And playing that way is successful sometimes. But what happens is when you play with such a slim margin for error and you're not the Steelers defense, you're going to lose sometimes to the Carolina Panthers. And that's what happened in that game. Bryce Young led an improbable 15-play drive in the fourth quarter of that game to set up the game-winning field goal. Now, watching our game against the Colts, it was exciting. It was a thrilling game. But the Colts couldn't beat Malik Willis last week. So it could be that the Colts are dreadful. And we beat them by 2 points. And we needed a miraculous third down conversion to Nico Collins on the sideline. Excellent catch, excellent throw. But we needed it to prevent the Colts from getting the ball back with a 2-point deficit at home, driving for a game-winning field goal. This was in a game in which we got the ball with 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter, and we ran it to run the clock down to the 2-minute warning, and then we ran it again after the 2-minute warning. And I'm convinced that the coaches were happy to go into halftime with, I think it was a 5-point lead at that point. They didn't need any more points than that. And I'm sitting there as a fan like, yeah, you actually do. Now, Joe Mixon got so many yards on those runs They were forced to sort of try to score, but even then they didn't try to score a touchdown. They tried to get into field goal range. And then with that referee botching of the time situation, I don't put that entirely on D'Amico Ryans, but if you don't understand the clock, is it running, what's it set at, go stand on the field as a head coach until they explain it to you. Go make sure you understand what the clock is doing. So we missed out on 3 points there. We settled for 50-yard field goals in that game several times, 4th and 1. We're kicking 52-yard field goals. That is a defensive-minded approach to football. Just take the points. Keep the clock running. Ball control. Now, fast forward to the Chicago game. Chicago had the ball down 6 at the end of the game. We could have lost that game very easily. We could be 0-2 right now because we are playing like we played against Carolina last year. I am of the mind that the edge that we are going to have as a team this year's Houston Texans is D&D, Diggs, Nico, Dell. Those 3 guys and Stroud getting them the ball relentlessly, picking on mismatches, setting up Joe Mixon's running because you cannot account for all 3 guys. Setting up Dalton Schultz underneath because it is so overwhelming to try to contain those 3 guys and CJ Stroud. That's going to give you a lead in these games in which you can unleash your pass rush because the other team has to throw the ball. That's how you maximize Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson Jr. It's by passing the ball aggressively, no huddle, movement, speed. You get the ball with 2.5 minutes left in the second quarter. I know from years of watching Peyton Manning in the AFC South, that's what he lived for. Give me the ball at the end of the half with 2 minutes. I'm going to score a touchdown. I'm going to put us in control of this game going into halftime. We are going to come out in the third quarter in an entirely different sort of mindset and situation. Dwight Freeney and Mathis, they can go to town because I've given them this lead. But the way the Texans are playing, you're not going to have those leads because we are going to play ball control, try to get a 50-yard field goal, punt. And it's like, it's not how I envision this team winning. This team playing this way, the way we've seen them through 2 weeks, they can win the AFC South this year because the AFC South is not good. But they will not beat a team that is playing well, or at least they won't do it 3 times in a row in the playoffs. When you play a team that is playing well, they're going to be able to put enough points on the board to where you're going to have to throw the ball. And rather than have to throw the ball, I would love for that to be our identity. But I think it's hard for a defensive-minded head coach to embrace that because it goes against his core philosophy of how you play football. And when we lose Bobby Slowick, and we will, it'll be interesting to see who we bring in because Bobby Slowick isn't doing anything that D'Amico Ryans doesn't authorize, right? So that is a game plan. They are sort of fist and hand in hand there. They are coming up with, Slowick is executing the game plan that Ryans wants him to execute. So we need those guys to be better, in my mind. This week we're playing the Minnesota Vikings. They're not great, but they're playing really well, and they're really well coached. And I think it'll be an interesting barometer for what this Texans team can do, both from a personnel standpoint and from a coaching standpoint. I'm very eager to watch Sunday's game. Thank you for listening. Go Texans.